So there's lots of tools out there. Some are more accessible than others, or deal with accessibility better than others. Um, but we're just going to talk about a couple of them, a little bit about Word and PowerPoint. These again, are going to be very high level, just things to consider. So when dealing with Word, and quite often with Word, you can kind of PDF your documents afterwards. Um, Matter of fact, in many cases, it's the best way to go if I'm uploading something into Brightspace, because if I upload a PDF file, typically everyone can read a PDF file. They may not have access to Word. Um, but things that you need to consider, again, dealing with fonts. We talked already a little bit about making sure that you're using the appropriate type of font, and the size of your fonts are also important. Using styles as you kind of build out larger documents, use styles that have proper headers, like headings, because again, screen readers can kind of go through that and help dissect a larger document to let the learner know when they're kind of starting a new topic or section, or whatever it is that you're kind of dealing with. We talked about tables already, and some of the things you need to consider when building out tables. Tables themselves, they can be problematic for screen readers. So again, keep your color contrasts in mind when building out tables. Images, make sure that you're adding alt text where appropriate. Using different layouts, making sure that everything, again, kind of working with that color contrast is working. The links that we've talked about, plenty of white space. It's almost better to span across, say, 3 pages of text than to try to cram everything into one page. So making sure that you have plenty of white space for the margins between paragraphs, just for easier readability. Know your audience, of course, and the language that you're using. And then you can always check for accessibility. While you're sitting in Microsoft Word, if you go to Info and then you go to check for issues, you can actually check the accessibility, and it'll give you a bit of a accessibility report and let you know what you can improve. It's not perfect, but it certainly is a little bit more helpful. Same with PowerPoint, a couple things to consider. Think about your template. Again, kind of going for color schemes and things like that. Less is more with PowerPoint. Don't bullet people to death. Um, Not always easy, as I've got a series of bullets here. No spinny things. If you remember from the face-to-face session that we did, Dan showed us a really good example of a bad PowerPoint where things are kind of spinning. This can cause some issues. Try to keep things consistent as well in terms of transitions. That way, people are kind of used to what's happening. It doesn't throw people off, doesn't short people out. Unique titles for each slides. Use the title. In most cases, the layouts provide a place to put a title for each slide. Again, this is more for a point of a screen reader. We kind of came in and needed to read it to let the learner know that we're starting a new slide. It would identify that as a title. Add speaker notes where possible. Again, it has more to do with how am I distributing. Obviously, if I'm just here, I've got my own speaker notes, and I'm never going to let anybody see this presentation. I don't need to provide them, but if it's something I'm passing along to my students, kind of filling in the context. Sometimes you have an image somewhere. And you're talking about it, so there's no context, so you just look at the image. I see that all the time. If you're using audio, if at all possible, provide a transcript of that audio. Again, that would be a matter if I had the speaker notes in place. I could print that off. It may not be exact to what I talked about, but it would be pretty close. It would be able to provide that information that we need. Placements of objects are also important. Sometimes when you kind of slap together a PowerPoint, you're moving things around, you insert something here, you insert something there. They are all in sequence according to PowerPoint. So a screen reader would come along and it would read, for instance, I put this in a different order. I put a few things on the screen. I think I have a block here and some titles here. So by the time we get here, the third item I put on the screen was this block. this was number 4, this is 5, and this was 6. So a screen reader would kind of come through and hit everything sequentially. In other words, it will start bouncing around, and then if I use my tab key to kind of, and that's how people use screen readers. They often use their tab key or some shortcut keys to navigate through the screen, and that depicts the order that people are moving in. So always keep that in mind. And kind of finally, chunking and sequencing. One thing we decided to do with these videos is we kind of broke them up a little bit so they're a bit shorter. They were all within 8 minutes or so. If you sat and listened to the whole thing, you might tune out, but the fact that we broke them down, hopefully you'll listen to one, you'll take a little break, you'll listen to something else. And this is just a really good example of where chunking and sequencing wasn't happening. It's quite garbled and difficult for the learner to view and digest and get through. So chunking your information and sequencing is also very important. So again, when talking about UDL and accessibility, multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of engagement is where it's at. That's what all the HIP kids are doing. But it's also something that you need to work toward. It's not something that you can accomplish in one day. You just don't have time. And to put all these things in place, you need to give yourself time. So part of it is developing habits. So you are doing such things as applying, kind of relatively decent fonts and font styles and using proper templates, tagging, putting tags in your alternate text, I should say, in your images where appropriate, and then just start building those habits in place, and then you can kind of break things out. And again, there's more and more tools surfacing every day that will help with such things as closed captioning, text-to-speech, creating audio files from text, all those things. So keep all of these things in mind. And again, just for me to zip back to a very early slide, if I can get there quickly, I'm sure there's an easier way. But just think in terms of, what if learners can't? They can't read it, they can't hear it, they can't see it, they can't process it. We want to remove those barriers. Anyway, thank you very much.